So I want to thank IPAC for inviting me to speak today. It's wonderful to be speaking on such an esteemed panel. And I just want to say I'm quite thrilled because I grew up reading Jim's work. And that hurt. I'm sorry.
I wrote that work when I was 12.
I used a lot of Leah's research when I was working on my graduate research on paid internships. So it's great to be speaking with both of them. So my slides are up. Good. So I'm going to be covering three areas today. And, the first part is going to cover off on some of the pressures that young people are facing in today's society. Then I'm going to move into touch upon specific labor market issues and use unpaid internships as a bit of a case study to illustrate what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to end by highlighting some policy options. Not too heavy on the policies, but I'll run through a few of them. And I should note that just given the audience here in Toronto, my comments are mostly specific to Ontario, but a lot of the points could be applied to Canada-wide as well. So what the sets use today? Let's go to the next one. There we are. The situation facing many young people today is nothing less than a crisis. From ever-increasing tuition fees to keeping credentialism, leading to somewhat of an educational arms race, to skyrocketing housing costs, to an extremely rocky school-to-labor market transition. Young people are beset on all sides from a stagnant economy and unresponsive policy on the part of government. It strikes me that all levels of government have long ignored the growth of precarious work and aren't really grappling with the issues of the new economy, where precarity, anxiety, uncertainty, and massive amounts of stress prevail and represent a new normal. These concepts are literally reshaping how we view the world and how we interact with each other on an individual level. So what's occurring with the newest generation is, what I consider to be the unraveling of our social fabric and creating a pervasive sense that conditions are getting worse. Just consider recent polling from Frank Graves of Ecos, which finds the majority of Canadians feel that the middle class is falling behind and that stark divisions have emerged between younger and older generations. Fully 57% of the people polled indicated that the next generation will be worse off than the current one. I think that's quite chilling. The area that strikes me as most worrying is that the social costs that we are experiencing from this increased precaritization. Young people are increasingly putting off relationships, forming households, and having children. Without economic stability, young people simply are forgoing these milestones that traditionally marked adulthood. And all of this has economic costs as well, and we see this in such trends as delayed adulthood, boomerang kids, housing unaffordability, and the inability to save for retirement. I would suggest that these downstream costs of all these trends will be enormous amid an aging population and slowing economic growth. Okay. So with this growth of these problems, we've seen the emergence of advocacy groups like Generation Squeeze, which is devoted to intergenerational equity and the generational spending gap, and the Canadian Intern Association, which I'm a part of, which is devoted to creating a fairer system of internships in Canada. These groups are increasingly calling attention to the raw deal that young people are getting in society and demanding policy responses on these fronts. Also, we're beginning to see organized labor groups like Unifor and the Canadian Media Guild championing issues such as precarious work and youth unemployment. Certainly all this indicates that there's an increasing level of tension, which raises profound questions of legitimacy going forward. And I would suggest that unless we as a society begin to grapple with these issues, none of the foregoing is going to bode well for the future of our democracy. So, moving into happier territory, the youth labor market. The situation that we have now is professionals working in pizza parlors, lawyers making coffee as baristas, and foreign-trained doctors hustling taxi gigs off Uber. This is a new economy. In many respects, our economy has stalled, and the growth isn't keeping up with the demands for jobs from new labor market entrants. It's apparent that young people, immigrants, women, Aboriginals, and racialized persons face heightened challenges within the labor market and are being buffeted by the winds of economic change. For young people, the challenges facing them read somewhat like a grocery list. Just consider these ones: underemployment, unemployment, the skills gap, lack of labor market information asymmetries, the lack of training being provided by employers, temporary foreign workers, the lack of benefits, two-tiered entitlements, and a shift to the flexible workforce. It's no wonder that young people feel that they're under, quite a bit of pressure. So I would argue that in the last decade, we've seen the emergence of some deep structural problems in the youth labor market directly linked to underemployment, low attachment to employers, and precarious work. Well, there's certainly jobs still out there for young people. For a growing portion of our young generations, the hallmarks of a good job, be it security, decent wages in the form of a living wage, benefits, or set hours of work, it's simply not available. So, the case study on unpaid internships. This is my area of expertise. So one of the most troubling trends that have developed in the youth labor market is that of unpaid internships. In theory, these positions are beneficial as they allow for students and young workers access to workplaces to test out various career options or as a means to gain experience. However, all signs point towards that unpaid internships are often now a means for employers to obtain free labor, shift risk and costs onto workers, and sometimes even replace paid employees. We caught an MPP, Rodney Jackson. He got defeated in the last election, but he replaced a paid employee with an unpaid intern. It was prominently reported in the media. So it does happen. Unpaid internships aren't tracked via any sort of official statistics, so the best estimates place the number of unpaid internships in Ontario somewhere around 100,000. Now, this number is probably higher if one includes the internships that students do, but it's not included in that figure. A recent Ministry of Labour inspection blitz showed that among employers that were using unpaid internships and were subject to an inspection, approximately 50% of them were violating the Employment Standards Act, which lines up with what Leah is suggesting. Out of the 13 employers that were found with violations, the total amount recovered was close to $50,000 in unpaid wages. So I think that symbolizes really the tip of the iceberg that we're seeing in this issue, where young people are increasingly being subjected to wage theft and employee misclassification in an attempt for employers to cut costs. Unpaid internships are the ultimate form of right to work, with no wages, no benefits, and often little ability to actually land a good job at the end of the day. Now, we've also seen a tragic human toll related to these positions, with 3 students dying in the last 10 months while undertaking work placement positions such as internships or co-op positions. The most recent one was just 2 weeks ago. With little workplace law reform having taken place over the last 10 years, no one bothered to cover interns or students under occupational health or safety laws or extend basic employment standards protections. And we're seeing the results of this rusting of labor law and the lack of enforcement. So that's a really big issue. So moving on to the public policy responses, and this is going to be my final section. Now, the foregoing has been all rather depressing in the assessment of where we're at. And I don't want to end on a negative note, so I'm going to leave you with three broad policy directions that we need to go to address some of the worst excesses of our economic system. The first is enacting demand-side labor market policy that takes a long view towards workforce development. As a society, we need to do a much better job of linking workers with actual opportunities. This requires a shift away from nearsighted supply-side strategies, which have been proven time and time again to be useless for workers, employers, and wider society. What's necessary is to create new forums to bring stakeholders together to identify where the opportunities and gaps exist in the workforce and to create strategies to address them. And, you know, I would suggest that an increased use of active labor market programs would be an idea in this regard. The second broad idea is placing intergenerational equity as a key lens through which policy decisions are evaluated. Increasingly, we're seeing demands from younger citizens for a more responsive and transparent government. The advent of social media has made politicians and bureaucrats instantly accessible, and from advocates for childcare to funding for in vitro fertilization to tuition fees, younger generations want a larger piece of the pie, and they're acutely aware that the spending on them is falling short. So addressing these growing risks and stopping intergenerational fracturing is necessary if we're going to maintain the social fabric of Ontario. Third, alongside a comprehensive labor market strategy, there needs to be a renewal of the social safety net in Canada to address the current realities of the labor market and economy. Programs like employment insurance and workers' compensation are becoming increasingly inaccessible to a large number of workers. These trends must be reversed. Next, solutions need to be found to providing citizens with a path to secure retirement, being enacting measures like the ORPP or expanding CPP. Finally, it's increasingly clear to me that linking economic and social stability on the individual level can no longer be based entirely on a person holding a job. To this end, we need to seriously consider implementing a guaranteed annual income, which will provide a basic level of support to all Canadians, regardless of circumstances. Thanks. That's all I have for now, and I look forward to the questions later on. Thank you.